I don't know about you, but I am excited. One of the things that I was excited about when I and my family moved to Colorado to be with you fine folks was the opportunity, or the perhaps opportunity and possibility, to go camping. It's been a long time since I've actually been tent camping. Perhaps I've been more glamping, if anything, in hotels or an RV, but not really roughing it. And I remember some of my very first experiences of camping as a young girl were with the Girl Scouts. And I had an unfortunate summer camp experience where I made my little sit-upon, the little square pillow that you make with 2 pieces of vinyl tablecloth and stitch it together and put some newspaper in for stuffing. Put my sit-upon on a fire ant hill that was hidden underneath the bark of a pine tree, and sat in it and ended up getting ant bites all over me, but I still persevered and wanted to continue to camp, but I was so sick I had to go home. Then as a teenager, going on youth group trips, and we were fortunate enough to raise money and go whitewater rafting. And one year we went and we were in northern Georgia, and we pitched our tents in this wonderful campsite. And we thought, this is fantastic. And then it rained, and we actually pitched our tents in the lowest point of the campground, and our tents filled up with water. But fortunately, my mom was smart enough to send me with an air mattress to put my sleeping bag on. So all my stuff was floating around in the tent, and all my friends, they were all soaking wet. And so tough times pitching a tent and camping and whatnot. But then I found a beautiful opportunity to tent camp in Southern Africa when I was on safari, and being in a tent not quite far enough from a pride of lions, but close enough to hear when they would bellow and roar, the ground underneath me shake, and to know that I was that close to God's creation and in the wild was something magical and majestic, and truly understood why they are called the king of the animals. And so this idea of camping and being one with nature and ourselves out in the world is where our gospel leads us today. And in verse 14, John wrote, "And the Word became flesh and lived among us." The Word became flesh and lived among us. And it's in that moment and in this moment that Jesus literally pitches his tent and lives here with us. This is the highest point of Christology in John's gospel, and understanding who the Christ is. And it all focuses right on this verse. And so it's quite amazing that we see this moment where Jesus really becomes not one of us, but is us. There's a great translation from the Message by Eugene Peterson. Mary Lou brings her copy of the Message to Bible study on Thursdays and enlightens us with all different kinds of reflections. But I wanted to share this from the Message in the same verse and how Eugene Peterson writes it. "The Word became flesh and blood and moved into the neighborhood. We saw the glory with our own eyes, the one-of-a-kind glory, like Father, like Son, generous inside and out, true from start to finish. The Word became flesh and blood and moved into the neighborhood." I think these two examples of understanding what the gospel is trying to tell us about who Jesus is very enlightening. And I think if we were to apply this to our daily lives and into the neighborhoods in which we live, we might think of one another, and we might think of the Christ differently. If Jesus literally pitches his tent, if Jesus literally moves into our neighborhood, well, then how are we supposed to act and react with the people around us? How are we supposed to find commonalities? How are we supposed to be in community with one another? It changes everything, and it allows us to really do what our baptismal covenant is asking us to do, to seek and search for Christ in all persons, loving our neighbor as ourselves. And so this gives us an opportunity as we move through this Christmas season, because yes, we have a Christmas season, it's not just one day, to be reminded that the incarnation, this becoming of body of Jesus, allows us to do new and exciting things with the community of our family, the community that lives in our neighborhood, the community of our church, and then the community of Greeley, that we continue, it's like concentric circles, and it continues to grow out. And that all comes from the incarnation of Jesus. In the translation that we have, the Word became flesh and lived among us, and we have seen his glory and the glory of the Father's only Son, full of grace and truth. And from his fullness, we have all received grace upon grace. I love that. Grace upon grace. And so it's at this point that we know that the law, the rules, everything came from Moses, but it is grace and truth that come from Jesus Christ. And so this is the continuation of this Christmas gift to us, grace and truth for all. For you remember, this is for all people, not just for some, not for select, not for just the people who deserve it, but for all to receive grace upon grace. And so now we get to live this out, this Christmas gift. We don't get to put it on a shelf. We don't get to put it back in its box and return it. And there's no receipt. There's no gift receipt. We don't get to put it down in the basement and wait for it to open it back up in the Christmas box next year when we put decorations out. No, this gift is something that we live with day in and day out. We put it on our sleeves, our shoulders, our heart. It's on our faces. This is the gift that continues to give us what we need every day, grace upon grace. And so I hope as you think about your neighborhood and the people around you and the opportunities to be out in God's creation, whether it's camping or hiking, but that Jesus is present and Jesus chose us, and God chose us as we are his disciples. The covenant that spans the test of time from Abraham to now. We received that gift, and Jesus embodies that and has been placed here. He pitched his tent. He moved into our neighborhood so that we can receive that grace and truth. So as you go about your day and your week and you continue on to this next year, and if you're one of those people who says, I'm going to do something new for the new year, I'm going to make a resolution, I'm going to change my ways, I'm going to start afresh and new, and man, for 2021, don't we all need it? I want you to think about how Jesus has pitched a tent and moved into your neighborhood, moved into your life, and find a way to share in that grace and truth, because God has given it to us as this most amazing gift, and it is ours to bestow on all the world. For we are the light of Christ. We are his hands and feet. And this is the only way that the world will know it. Amen.